We're looking at Esther. The survey is part of the complete survey of the Old Testament designed for Native Americans. Now, Esther's can be seen as providence, courage, salvation, and celebration. God had her in a providential place to save the Jewish people and the Messiah who had come. Now, a survey of the book of Esther. The title of the book of Esther is named after the primary character. She's a Jewish girl who becomes queen of Persia and is used by God to prevent the annihilation of his chosen people. The human writer of the book of Esther is not revealed in the Bible. The date of the writing of the book of Esther was written sometime after the death of King Ahasuerus, 465 BC. Esther 10:2-3 speaks of his reign in past tense. The setting of the book of Esther. Babylon ruled as the world power until 539 BC, when it was conquered by Persia. Cyrus, king of Persia, permitted the Jews to return to their homeland, and about 50,000 eventually returned. Darius became king of Persia in 522 BC. He ruled until his death in 486 BC. He was succeeded by his son Ahasuerus, also known as Xerxes, who ruled until 465 BC. The events in the book of Esther takes place between 483 to 473 BC during the reign of Ahasuerus. Esther became queen about 479 BC. The book of Esther fits into nearly 60 years between Ezra chapter 6, the first return of the exiles to Jerusalem, led by Zerubbabel, and Ezra chapter 7, the return, led by Ezra. Now, significant people in the book of Esther. Esther, beautiful orphan girl, is a Persian for star, her name. Her name was Hadassah, Esther 2:7. She may have been given the new name Esther when she's brought into the royal harem. Mordecai, Esther's cousin who adopted her when her parents died and raised her as a daughter. Mordecai had a lower-ranking office in the king's palace, Esther chapter 2, verses 5-7. Ahasuerus, also known in the Greek Xerxes, the king of Persia from 486 to 465 BC. Haman, a high-ranking Persian official who had a deep prejudicial animosity toward the Jews. The theme and purpose of the book of Esther. The theme of the book of Esther is that God uses ordinary men and women to overcome seemingly impossible circumstances to accomplish his purpose. The purpose of the book of Esther is to demonstrate God's loving care for his people, encouraging the Jews with the great way God delivered the Jewish people during the reign of King Ahasuerus. Now, summary of the content of the book of Esther. The book of Esther may be divided in two main sections. 1. The threat to the Jews, chapters 1-4. The triumph of the Jews, chapters 5-10. Now, the content of the book of Esther. In section 1, the threat to the Jews, chapters 1-4. In Esther chapter 1, Ahasuerus, king of Persia, holds a 7-day feast for all the people in Shushan. During the feast, the king demands that his queen, Vashti, display her beauty to the people and officials present. Vashti refuses, upsetting the king, who asks his advisors what to do. One of the king's officials suggests that Vashti's action might lead to the insubordination of women throughout the kingdom, and suggests that she be removed from being king. Ahasuerus deposes Vashti and seeks another queen to replace her. In Esther chapter 2, a beauty contest is held to determine Vashti's successor. Esther is chosen to participate in a beauty contest to select a new queen. Mordecai instructs Esther not to reveal her Jewish identity. Esther is chosen by the king to be Vashti's successor, the queen of Persia, the most powerful nation in the world in that day. Mordecai discovers a plot to assassinate the king. He passes information on to Esther, who informs the king. The plot is foiled, and would-be assassins are executed. Mordecai's deed is recorded in the Book of Chronicles of King Ahasuerus' reign, but then is seemingly forgotten. In Esther 3, King Ahasuerus promotes an official named Haman and commands that people bow down to Haman as a gesture of respect and honor. Mordecai upsets Haman by refusing to bow down to him. Haman plans his revenge by planning to massacre all the Jews in the empire, because he knows that Mordecai is a Jew. Haman gets King Ahasuerus to agree to a decree authorizing this, and sends letters throughout the empire publishing that decree. Chapter 4. Mordecai urges Esther to intercede on behalf of the Jews. Esther replies that her life is at stake if she approaches the king's inner court when he is not asked to see her. Esther displays tremendous courage and agrees to approach the king, declaring, "If I perish, I perish," Esther 4:16. Esther asks the Jews in Shushan to fast and presumably pray for 3 days prior to her going to see the king. Esther 5. Esther invites the king and Haman to a banquet. The way to a man's heart is through his stomach. At that banquet, the king volunteers to grant Esther anything she wants. Esther merely extends an invitation for the king and Haman to attend another banquet the next day. Haman is irked by another lack of respect on the part of Mordecai. Haman's wife and friends suggest he build a gallows and obtains the king's permission to hang him the next day. So he goes out and builds the instrument of death, thinking he's done with Mordecai, not realizing he's going to reap what he sows. Chapter 6. That night, the king, Ahasuerus, is unable to sleep and asks for the chronicles of his reign to be read. Such dull material will put anyone to sleep. The particular passage that is read deals with Mordecai's oral report of the assassination plot sometime earlier. The king discovers Mordecai had never been rewarded for uncovering the assassination plot and saving the king's life. Just then Haman comes to see the king, intending to ask permission to hang Mordecai on his gallows he had prepared. The king asks Haman, "What shall be done unto men whom the king delights to honor?" Esther 6:6. Haman thinks the king wants to honor me. It recommends that the king put a royal garment on a man, set him on one of the king's horses, and let him be paraded throughout the city to honor. The king agrees. It makes Haman lead Mordecai through the city proclaiming, "This Mordecai is the man the king delights to honor." Chapter 7. At the second banquet, Esther reveals her Jewish identity to the king. Esther also reveals a plot against the Jews and names Haman as the instigator of the planned massacre. The adversary and enemy is this wicked Haman, Esther 7:6. The king takes a walk in the palace garden, contemplating what to do. Meanwhile, Haman pleads with Esther for his life. In the process, Haman falls on the couch where Esther is reclining. At that very moment, the king returns and sees us. The king executes Haman, hanging him on the gallows Haman had prepared for Mordecai. Chapter 8. Even though Haman was dead, the king could not cancel the decree regarding the planned slaughter of the Jews. Persian law was irrevocable. For another example of this policy among the Persians, see Daniel 6:8, 12, and verse 15. In response to Esther's request, the king authorizes Mordecai to write a new decree, allowing the Jews to resist on the day of the planned massacre. The king's messenger carries copies of the new decree throughout the empire. Jews throughout the empire rejoice upon learning of the new decree, and many non-Jews become Jewish proselytes. Esther chapter 9. On the day they were originally supposed to be killed, the Jews take advantage of the new decree and overpower any enemies who attack them. Mordecai institutes an annual feast of Purim, commemorating the failed massacre. The Feast of Purim consists of 2 days of rejoicing and giving gifts to one another on the 14th and 15th days of the Jewish month Adar, the equivalent of our mid-February to mid-March. Chapter 10. Mordecai is elevated to the position just below king and gains great favor among the Jewish people. God started him in a humble place and elevated him. We need to trust God with our futures. He can do the impossible. Here's interesting facts about Esther. You may want to pause this video to look at it in detail. Now, the 75-foot gallows was constructed. Here you can use your phone to do the homework, look at the QR code, or simply copy the address. As a brief chronology, the entire Bible, you can see where we've come to. Esther being between Ezra and the book of Nehemiah, there in that particular time period. A journey through the Bible. And the Old Testament periods and people, we look at the 10th area that we're looking at, the time of the return. Now, gaining an overview of the Old Testament, use your phone. Once again, look at these 2 videos, QR codes, and then there's a master copy of the homework that you can do the entire Old Testament. You can find this on nativemi.org, Robert D. Corah, Robert D. Corah at Gmail. You may write me if you have any questions. Native Americans are permitted to use this. Dr. Rich Costanza, thank you for providing these notes.